Everyone, I'm Tyler,
Oh, and I'm Justine.
and welcome to our project on photography. So let's get through this pretty quick because we have way too much to talk about. The art of photography. Photography is the art or practice of taking and processing photographs. So what we'll cover today is some of the history. We'll cover some of the lenses with Snell's law, some inner workings of the camera and aperture and f-stop, some chromatic aberration, which is principles of diffraction, of visible light, film and light sensors that involve the photoelectric effect, how modern day cameras work, some light sensors, and the CCD and CMOS, which are the light sensors that we use in modern day photography. So we're just going to narrow down on modern day photography instead of the vast majority, all there is to know about photography, because there's a lot more. So we're just going to stick on the modern day ones at the moment. So cameras have been come a long way since their origins of the pinhole effect around 400 BC, a situation in which outside lit up scenery could be displayed as an image inverted from a pinhole in a dark room. That's just the basic fundamentals of photography and how it works today. You have an image and it gets filtered through a certain hole and projected and inverted. It's just how any photography is captured at the moment. From temporary to permanent, silver nitrate was realized to be a light-sensitive compound, and in turn, things started evolving for photography. Not in abundant, this chemical isn't abundant, but as a photochemical effect, and is still used in some photography today. The first permanent photo was made by Joseph Mies in 1826. That took about 8 hours to make with a piece of pewter and silver nitrate. Here seen on the right side here, that's the first photo that was ever made. 8 hours to expose. Piece of pewter was a piece of metal and silver nitrate laid over it with a light box and a small pinhole. 8 hours later, we have our first permanent photo, which slingshot and started the rest of how cameras work and the rest of how photography came to be. Shortly after the first camera was made, after the first picture was taken, a permanent picture was taken. It started with a daguerreotype in 1839, which is this one here. Moved to the Polaroid snapshots, the SLRs, and now we have DSLRs, which are what we'll be covering a lot of today. So this is kind of a very blurry inner working of how a camera works. This is going to be considered an SLR camera, but you have your lenses here first and your aperture. Your aperture is a hole that opens and closes that will change the field of view. The lenses that will dial in the visible light and focus it as much as you possibly can, or magnify it, or even zoom out, to get different effects. The visible light will then be transferred and hit this mirror, and it will refract into a viewfinder, which you'll see with your eye. When you're ready to take the photo, this viewfinder, which is pink line, will drop. It will be exposed to the shutter will lift, and the sensor will be ready to capture the light. And we'll talk a little bit more about each parts, the aperture, the shutter, and the sensor, and some of the lenses. So let's get started with the lenses. Cameras use both convex and concave lenses. A converging lens makes an image smaller by directing incoming light to a certain focal point, and diverging lenses blow up an image by directing light away from a focal point towards the CCD, which is the sensor, and a modern camera. So here again, you have your classic pinhole effect and how it's converted through here. These are groupings of multiple lenses in modern day cameras, used to help focus the actual image themselves onto the sensor. The more focus and more lenses that you have to group and correct the refraction, the better image quality you'll get. Let's go on to a little bit more lenses. Lenses are called with the DSLR, a certain index of refraction stable throughout the camera. Each curvature and the curvature of the lens is responsible for magnifying the visible light. The bigger the angle of curvature, the greater the magnification, and the smaller the focal length will be. By having multiple lenses, you can help magnify and focus the pathway of the focal point as it reaches and extends through the camera. It will have a series of converging and diverging lenses. This helps stabilize towards the shutter where the light is ultimately captured. All right, so Justine?
Okay, so an important...
You have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. An important part to capturing an image is something called an aperture. In a camera, aperture are blades that you can move in and out to control how much light enters a camera. And how much light enters the camera controls the depth, which is the area of the image that stays sharp. To measure the aperture and the amount of light that goes into the camera, we use units called f-stop numbers. And f-stop numbers are a ratio of focal length and the diameter to the entrance pupil. You see in the diagram here, we have f-stop numbers. The F, which stands for focal length, is the numerator, and the denominator is the f-stop number. The larger, because it's a ratio, the larger the f-stop number, the smaller the aperture. And you can also see that in the diagram. Another thing that is important is the focal length has a direct relationship with the depth. Next slide, please. Again, because smaller f-stop numbers have larger openings, it shortens the focal length, which directly lessens the depth, which allows only the forefront or the background to be focused. Because the opening is bigger for smaller f-stop images, this takes in more light, which lets it be good for nighttime shots, portraits, and action shots. Larger f-stop numbers give smaller openings, which increases the focal length and allows both the forefront and the background to be focused. So for the, yeah, keep on going.
Unmute myself. So we'll move on to chromatic aberrations. So chromatic aberrations are the natural diffractions that happen when trying to capture visible light. You can use concave lenses to get rid of the distortions that happen after the concave lenses that you have. As shown, if you look at the picture to the right, the pictures to the right, on the left side, you'll see a pretty much blurry outline of kind of like red and blue. Pull out some 3D sunglasses and you'll start to see the colors pop. So what this happens because visible light is made up of many colors of light, red and blue, many colors of light from red to blue. Each photon of light reflects slightly differently than the other, creating an unstable focal point and unstable image. In principle, you have like the Pink Floyd right at the top there for you. I will show you that visible light has a spectrum of red to blue, or red to purple basically, and each different light gets diffracted a little bit more than the other. So white light is a combination of stubble wavelengths when going through the lenses. Chromatic aberration separates the white light from other wavelengths. So shorter wavelengths, which would be blue, reflect less than the higher wavelengths of red. And here you can kind of see the focal plane. There's no focal point, it's more of a focal plane. So that's what causes a little bit of deviation when you're trying to capture the image. And through multiple lenses, you can focus it a little bit better. Or you can use a CCD to kind of weed out kind of like the unnecessary noise. So,
okay. So old film strips are made out of sensitive silver halide crystals. When light hits film, a photon is absorbed, breaking a silver bromide bond and knocking off an electron. This electron that pops off travels to a sensitivity spec and bonds with a positively charged silver ion that is amplified to a negative image. What happens here is something that we've learned called the photoelectric effect, and that's when a light photon hits metal with a high enough frequency and wavelength, an electron pops off from the leftover energy, and the more intense the light is, the more electrons that pop off. Next slide, please. And so in modern day cameras, when light comes in, light is measured by sensors for intensity and put through Bayer filters to identify the color. Bayer filters use what we've learned where colored filters transmit its identical color but absorb other wavelengths of color. And a Bayer filter is made of red, green, and blue filters that transmit light with its color and records it. A percentage of each primary color make up the color of each pixel in your photo. And like in film, modern day cameras also use the photoelectric effect. And this happens on light sensitive pixels, and the free electrons made make a charge that can be interpreted by a computer. And next slide, please. Two types of modern day cameras, CCD and CMOS. CMOS uses less power, and while CCDs are able to create images with significantly less noise. Another downside to CMOS cameras is that they're less light sensitive due to their design. When light enters a CMOS camera, some of the photons hit the transistor instead of the sensors, and so not all the light is registered. Next slide, please. And the main difference between these two different cameras is that the CMOS uses something like a rolling shutter where it exposes the frame from top to bottom, so light is sensed one frame at a time. And when a camera is moved, the object in the image will be stretched like it is in the bottom picture. And a CCD uses something called a global shutter, which captures the entire frame at once, causing the image to blur if the camera is moved, like in the top photo. And that is all. Thank you.
That about covers it. Thank you guys and have a wonderful day. Hopefully we didn't bore you to death. Take care.
Bye.